Hello, and welcome to another fully live Friday episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today I have my good friend and hacker Alex Lin here to help us go through the weekly hacking news and talk about what happened this week. So there's a lot to talk about. In particular, Alex, what is this doing? What is this weird light?
This is one of our beautiful Nugget Suns, and as you can see, he's currently lighting up a NeoPixel ring. So I think this is currently detecting Wi-Fi packet. Oh, did I jump the gun there?
Yeah, you jumped the gun.
No. Okay, I'll let you explain it.
All right. Well, I was gonna say, doesn't this pattern seem a little bit random? And actually, what this is doing here is this is using Python to detect Wi-Fi packets and visualize them by lighting up this little ring of pixels. So it's kind of just a neat way of showing that it's easy to get started programming for Wi-Fi related stuff. But this is one of my favorite things that's actually happened this week is that CircuitPython, which is a great way to control hardware like the ESP32S2 here, actually just added promiscuous mode, or monitor mode. So can you explain, Alex, what that is?
Yeah, so it's a mode that comes on some Wi-Fi devices, and it basically allows it to look for nearby Wi-Fi packets and monitor conversations that are happening between devices that are near you. So you can see things like when devices are connecting to a new network, if devices are broadcasting a network name, if they're being kicked off the network, sort of information like that. You can see what devices are interacting with each other, and other sorts of metadata about them.
Yeah, and so typically the way that a Wi-Fi chip is designed to work is it's supposed to kind of function like selective hearing. So if Alex and I are having a conversation in a room full of just a crowd, there's going to be lots of other conversations happening, but my brain is going to be selectively ignoring them in favor of the one conversation I'm having. And that's the way that Wi-Fi usually works. It's designed to listen to a single conversation being directed at it. But of course, I can actually hear all these other conversations. It's just my brain works to filter out this extraneous data. And that's exactly the way that most Wi-Fi chips are programmed. So when we have the ability to enter monitor mode or start promiscuous mode and start listening to conversations that are not for us, then we have the ability to learn a lot about the world around us when it comes to the Wi-Fi conversations that are happening. So usually, if you wanted to do this on a microcontroller, what are your options, Alex?
You could use like the ESP8266 in promiscuous mode.
What do you have to program that in?
Arduino usually.
Yep, Arduino.
But now that they've added support through CircuitPython, it seems we have another viable route.
Yes, so if you wanted to do this previously on a microcontroller, then you could do it, but you would need to program in C++. And there are some people who maybe don't like C++ as much as they like Python.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's really, really awesome to be able to have a beginner-friendly language offer the ability to grab Wi-Fi packets raw and just kind of do whatever you want with them. So this is a pretty incredible thing. You can see if we switch over to my screen here, I was demonstrating this last night by grabbing the packets and displaying them on the screen as they were coming in, which was a really cool way of not only showing, I could be sorting these and making it kind of like the friend detector that Alex created, where it detects when a certain Wi-Fi device comes into range. Or I could do something like the deauth detector, where I could just look for certain types of packets that indicate that someone is being deauthenticated. It's now possible with Python. So really what blew me away is the way that CircuitPython rolls their stuff out. So, okay, this feature just came out in CircuitPython 16 hours ago, and I'm using a very specific device here. I'm using an ESP32S2 microcontroller, which of course we put in the back of our Wi-Fi Nugget board. So, since I'm building this for a very specific device, you would kind of think it would take a while for them to roll it out to all their devices. No, they have an almost hourly update page where every time they compile a new version of CircuitPython, it gets compiled for every single one of the boards that they support and automatically pushed out. So I was able to download this, drag and drop it onto my CircuitPython board to update the version of CircuitPython and get started using promiscuous Wi-Fi mode almost immediately. So it was just a very, very cool way to get started with this because frankly, it's not as much fun to write this in Arduino IDE. You have to compile it and stuff. And here you can just write your code, save it directly to the microcontroller, and it just works.
So cool to see it update live too. That's the cool thing about CircuitPython. And you can also just drag and drop the code literally directly on this microcontroller with the added USB support.
Yeah, so that's the big reason that Adafruit has started using the ESP32S2 as one of its main boards that it's kind of pushing, because once you plug this into your computer, it mounts itself as a flash drive. And what's easier than just dragging and dropping your code onto a flash drive, rather than compiling it, like making sure you have the right board selected, making sure you have the right port selected, sending it over, and then hoping you don't have like a bad USB cable or something. So this is just so much more straightforward for beginners. We've been working with microcontrollers for a long time, and again, it's super exciting to see that the CircuitPython language is starting to adopt some of these really cool things for hackers who might want to, have more control over being able to react to stuff in the Wi-Fi environment. So this also includes signal strength, which I think is great because you can make a proximity tracker. You could potentially track down the source of a Wi-Fi signal with this. So if you are a Python programmer and you want to get into working with Wi-Fi, you should check out CircuitPython, because now you can get these boards for relatively cheap, and you can get started doing Wi-Fi sensing and reacting to whatever you want using Python. So wasn't previously possible, or if it was very, very glitchy, but now it is officially supported and it's been brought into the CircuitPython main compiled binary. So I have a specific shout out to these two people, Micro Devin, and then you pronounce this.
Dad.
Yeah. These two people did a fantastic job making this happen. I was just following this thread on GitHub for a long time. So if you want to thank someone for bringing Wi-Fi sensing to this platform, then thank these two, because they did an amazing job. And I was able to test their work almost immediately, and it's so cool. So I'll also be working on some more projects using Python and doing Wi-Fi sensing stuff. Maybe Alex can help me on that. But expect to see some more projects focused on this, because I think, again, Python's much easier for beginners. And if you've been itching to get into using some Python with microcontrollers to do Wi-Fi stuff, then you can do a lot of cool things.
Oh, one thing. Can you see packets yet fully? Because I know that was a problem on the ESP8266.
So,
just metadata.
So looking at the size of the packets, my indication is that they're probably still a lot of the same limitations. So we can't see encrypted packets, and we see management packets only. We can see a lot of different types, so that gives us metadata. We can see the raw packet, but I'm not sure if it's truncated. So basically what I would need to do is record a capture on the microcontroller, and record a capture through a supported wireless card in Wireshark, and then just compare the values of the packets and look to see whether or not there's truncation going there. So what Alex is asking kind of relates to the ESP8266. It specifically will truncate packets. It'll cut them off at a certain point in order to save space and make sure it doesn't get overwhelmed. It prevents you from doing things like handshake capture. So you couldn't, kick someone off a Wi-Fi network and grab the handshake and try to crack it, because you would only get the headers. As I was doing this, I was seeing that the packets kind of look a little shorter than I was expecting. So they very well may be truncated, but we'll need to do a couple more experiments to see if this is actually the case. Since it's the ESP32, though, I have some hope that maybe they're not truncated, because I know that Stefan was able to get packet capture working on the ESP30, just the regular ESP32. Oh, cool. So maybe there's some hope there. Overall, though, super, super cool project. Shout out to CircuitPython for having really great infrastructure, and also taking this sort of thing really seriously when it comes to getting awesome features out to all the people that are using this. So really cool development. And speaking of CircuitPython, are you sold on it? Do you want to get started with it? Do you want to try it? So CircuitPython is a port or a fork of MicroPython that is supported by Adafruit, and in my opinion works really, really well. You can just use Moo Editor, which I have over here, and it's really simple. You just plug in your board, it automatically detects it, and I can just press save in order to get started running my code. It's honestly one of the best experiences I've had with working with microcontrollers, and I just did a Hack 5 episode showing you how to get started. So here's a hint. You can do it with no command line tools, and you can do it just by using a web browser and Moo Editor, which I think is, again, super, super cool. So if you want to learn more about CircuitPython, honestly, I think that this is one of the most neat programming languages I've worked with. Check it out, because the ESP32S2 is now out. You can find it in various form factors, and I think it's an awesome way to get started controlling hardware using Python, and now, includes Wi-Fi as well. So when I first started this episode, they didn't even support promiscuous mode. So it seems like a lot of features are being added to it pretty regularly. And I even saw some interesting features I haven't tested yet from the same developer talking about adding the ability to to broadcast arbitrary packets or create like fake networks and stuff like that. So seems like there's a lot of Python related goodness going on in the Wi-Fi space with microcontrollers around the ESP32S2, and Adafruit's responsible for a lot of it. So hi Adafruit, notice me.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat that says, what's the difference between MicroPython and CircuitPython?
That's so good, and thank you for asking. So MicroPython is a version of Python that is open, like it's a community project. And here's my high-level experience with the two languages. MicroPython works, but their documentation was written like 5 to 8 years ago. So you'll find stuff that looks like really old looking example, and it just works. But like it makes you very nervous because like the documentation was so old that some of these people aren't even doing the same thing anymore or maintaining some of these projects. So like MicroPython also really works super hard to try to make it accessible for beginners. So they have something called the web REPL, where this little ESP8266 running MicroPython will create an access point you can join on your computer, and then you can program over Wi-Fi, just to try to make it so you don't have to connect via serial and do some of the other command line stuff, which frankly really sucks and makes it harder for beginners to get started. So the kind of handicap of MicroPython, in my opinion, is the fact that you often do have to use command line stuff in order to get working with it. And on the other side, CircuitPython is a fork of MicroPython that is officially supported by Adafruit on all of their products, and they dedicate a lot of resources to adding new stuff, updating things, and making sure the environment works. Now I come to the part where Adafruit's going to get mad at me. I find their examples to be slightly, tiny bit whack. And the reason for that is because if I need to just put some text on a screen or make a NeoPixel light up, I want like 3 lines of code so I can understand what's happening and I can apply it to my own project. But they're very fond of having like full projects that have like some crazy thing that it does that's like 129 lines long to basically teach you how to flash an LED. So if you're a beginner and you're like looking through there with like a magnifying glass trying to find the part that like is relevant to the one thing you want to do, it makes you really mad. So CircuitPython I found can be hard to learn in other ways, sometimes because the examples they give are just too convoluted for a beginner to really understand like how to actually use this library they're trying to teach. And that's something I feel like they could do a little bit better. On the flip side, their community is really, really excellent, and their stuff is updated frequently. So you'll typically be looking at documentation that was written very freshly for these libraries or other things that come out. And honestly, they put so much energy into getting rid of the command line stuff that as a CircuitPython user, I could confidently take like a high schooler or a middle schooler with the computer that has Google Chrome installed and show them how to set up and install CircuitPython and expect them to know how to do it from that point on. I cannot say the same thing with MicroPython. So overall, the investments that Adafruit has made into CircuitPython have made it a much friendlier platform to beginners and made their products just really easy to use. And that's why we really like them, and we really like the fact that they make these innovations public, because it means that we can do things for our projects like flash them through a web interface, and that's just because of what Adafruit has done for CircuitPython. So
yeah, the different ecosystems that Adafruit is setting up are super easy to get started with and to work with. It's really great. And I really like that they're developing this project to work on like all sorts of platforms.
Yeah, it's seriously really cool. It's something that I've enjoyed working with, and the code examples are a little bit different, so as you get started programming with one versus the other, you might get a little frustrated sometimes just when something doesn't work quite the same way, but I found that I really like both in their own right. So I work with MicroPython a lot. In fact, it's a primary project we made for our Wi-Fi Nugget because CircuitPython is not supported on smaller boards like the ESP8266, which don't have native USB support. But if it does have native USB support like the ESP32S2, then you can just flash CircuitPython on it, and honestly, I feel like it's a little bit better in some ways. Okay, so let's get into the news. So this first piece is about probably everyone's worst nightmare when it comes to ransomware. Like, what are, like, aside from nuclear facilities, I guess, like, there are, like, health facilities are one of the worst places that could be hit by a ransomware attack. And it seems like this actually happened to a couple healthcare agencies in Canada. So in particular, this was Central Health, Eastern Health, Western Health, and this one. And of course, they haven't actually like really disclosed much about what happened with this, but they apparently had to go back to pen and paper and cancel lots and lots and lots of appointments. And you know that some of those appointments, seeing as they were with health providers, were probably pretty important. So these sorts of attacks are some of the most devastating and also, I would say, difficult to justify because they're completely opportunistic and they really do hurt people. So we don't have a lot of details on this yet. They say that there was a significant impact and there was a damaged data center. But again, most people are suspecting that this is a cyber attack that has not really been fully disclosed as ransomware, but the signs are all there for it being a ransomware attack. And then seeing as how a lot of different ransomware groups are targeting people that are extremely likely to pay the ransom, a healthcare agency is extremely likely to pay the ransom because they're critical. Of course, it's also extremely likely to get your door kicked in eventually, but we'll get to that in some later parts of the news. Okay, and this is an ongoing story. So if you were on Twitter earlier in the week, you might have seen that Distributed Denial of Secrets, who is a group that has been publishing a lot of like leaked police data or leaked just like general data from companies, has leaked a bunch of data about police helicopter surveillance. So, you know, we see helicopters in the sky and like we generally assume that they're only filming like a couple of things, like, you know, suspects, like police actively engaged in their duties. But this data leak actually showed that they kind of just watch whatever they want. There's footage of like children playing. There is footage of a lady sunbathing in her backyard.
What the heck?
And this is just the kind of thing that you would expect, you know, maybe them to try to avoid if they knew that people were going to see that they were being recorded and entered into the public record. Like, I'm sure that this lady's not super thrilled that there's a video of her in her backyard, which is probably super recognizable because the footage is high definition and you're able to see, you know, the address and all the other information of the house. Like, probably not a huge fan of that being entered in the public record when there's no, you know, she's sunbathing. Like, presumably there's no warrant. Like, they're just flying over her and zoomed in to see what was going on. But now that data has been recorded and now that is available for everyone to see. The fallout from this is continuing. Because, and I think there's another story. Oh, no. There's more stories later. But the fallout for this is continuing because there's a lot of things that they recorded that a lot of people might find uncomfortable.
It's kind of concerning, and considering like all the scary technology they have on there to like track you and stuff like that.
Well, that's the other thing, because you kind of assume they've got like that camera from like Cops or whatever, like still on the helicopter that they used for police chases back in the 90s, and that is not the case. A lot of this equipment is incredibly sophisticated, and one of the things that people were really kind of freaked out by is the level of zoom and the level of other sorts of imaging that you can get from this sort of technology. So I've seen, for example, during, I think it was a protest or something, there was footage of a helicopter sweeping around and then switching to infrared mode so they could see through the windows of the building.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This looks like infrared or something like that, using like heat maps to detect where bodies are at. Or...
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So some of this technology was then used to, you know, go around and like surveil entire buildings by just, you know, being able to strip right past like blinds or other things that were obscuring the building. It's really pretty crazy to know that you could think that you're hidden and still have a helicopter tooling around recording you into public record with no real like warrant or cause. They just happen to be in the area pointing this incredibly powerful surveillance device around and just taking videos. So, you know, this is stuff that captures license plates, tons of identifying information. And it's really something that people don't think a lot about when they have these helicopters operating in the areas as to, like, could I be the target of their surveillance? And if there was a leak or if some other case came up, like, is something I'm doing right now that's perfectly innocent, is that going to be blasted all over the internet? Is that going to be interpreted in some other way without context? It's really hard to know. And that's why we try to have, you know, some sort of, like, paper trail or, like, some sort of, like, chain of authorization to get surveillance powers on random citizens. But helicopters seem to be one of those things that have slipped through the cracks where the technology that they're carrying around has gotten more and more advanced, but the laws around what they can film really haven't evolved very much at all. So this is something that's kind of upsetting people because, you know, if you're sunbathing in your backyard, you might think that a helicopter isn't going to come sweep down and record you into public record. But in this case, if you were in Dallas, you would have been wrong.
Living in like a big city too, just seeing like helicopters circling you is just like white noise at some point, and you don't really think about it possibly being a security thing that's filming you at any moment. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, here we go. So this is the footage that really kind of freaked me out. So, or actually, maybe it's not this one. But this is just an example, I think, of like the zoom capability and how far in they can go. These cameras are really. Oh, yeah. There we go. So now we're switching to heat mapping. You know, this is really sophisticated stuff. And just watching the footage from this is pretty startling because, you know, this is super high resolution, zooms in super far. You can see through walls, like windows, stuff like that. It's just not what the average person probably expects the police to be lugging around. But yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And if you want to take a look at some of the more footage that's out there, they have really good examples of how far in this stuff can zoom. So this is an example of zooming all the way in to see like license plates and stuff like that. Oh, and then there's the famous lady sunbathing. She's not in the buff, but I think they probably picked her because if there were nude people sunbathing, they didn't want them to die of embarrassment as a side effect of the story. But yeah, so all in all, not something a lot of people signed up for. Oh, sorry, this is the thermal imaging one. I just wanted to show you this. Like this building looks pretty opaque. I can't tell what's going on here, but now you can. So by changing the imaging settings and sweeping around like this, you can actually see inside the building.
Yeah, look at all those people.
Yeah, and you can see what's going on inside. So again, like this is just something you probably wouldn't expect your average police helicopter to be tooling around with, like if they're just like watching traffic or whatever. But maybe they're not just watching traffic. Maybe they're watching you through your walls. Sorry, there's going to be some paranoid people that really don't like that suggestion.
Some targeted individuals.
Yeah. So, all right. Next up, we have a good piece by the EFF talking about data brokers. So there are lots of mobile applications that will sell their location data to data brokers. And what that process looks like is they generally want to kind of accumulate as much information about a person's movements as possible and then sell that information to whoever wants it. It could be private investigators, it could be the government, it could be the police, it could be the military. It doesn't really matter. They take cards. So what we're looking at here is kind of a loop where by installing certain applications on your phone or just having apps on your phone that are reporting back your location data, this information gets granularly connected and then collected and then sold to organizations that might be using it for law enforcement or also might just go ahead and leak it. With all the different data breaches around government agencies not properly securing their stuff, having an intimate record of your movements, not really collected with your consent, be sold to these parties and then leaked is a very real possibility. So beyond just the fact that these data brokers have absolutely no requirements when it comes to accuracy, or like making sure that their data is like really 100% reliable, the problem is if you're just buying this data and you're not getting a warrant and then you're just having tons of data to digest of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong, it really starts to get around due process if you're able to surveil people on that level and never really need to provide a reason for why you're watching them. I mean, if you've got a big budget, then what's the point of going through the whole process of getting a warrant and doing all that if you can just turn around and buy the information you're looking for and get a pretty good idea of whether or not that's your suspect. And of course, like you don't even need to necessarily report that that's why you've zeroed in on them because a lot of police won't do that. They'll just end up finding another piece of evidence from what they've already found that kind of confirms their suspicions and just go off of that other piece of evidence as the primary one that kind of like cracked the case. This is something we saw a lot with like the stingrays and like other sorts of like devices where police really didn't want to admit that they existed because they were controversial. So district attorneys would just be like, don't even mention them. And if the case is going to have to make you mention them, then just drop the case. So that's the kind of the fear here is that people who are doing investigations can rely on this information without going through any sort of due process, and then the information they get might either be immediately lost or exposed, or it could be wrong. Because again, these data brokers don't have any legal requirement to make sure that their data isn't messed up. And you have, as far as I know, not very many options when it comes to reviewing the information they've collected about you. So this is something where if you didn't know that this sort of data is collected about you and then sold, it's really important to just realize that that's happening because it's easy to forget that the apps on your phone have a second purpose aside from just, maybe Burger King wants to know where you are, not just because they want to let you know when it's time to send you an ad about getting a free burger, but maybe they want to make some extra cash on, letting somebody else know when you're near one of their restaurants and they don't have the capability to create their own app. That's something where a lot of companies will make extra money and you just don't know where that data is going to end up.
It's really sneaky, and I don't like that because like lots of times when you're just like signing up for an app or something like that, you don't really look into the details of the terms of service. You don't know what data is just like put out there.
Oh, I love this. Veriset, spun out of Safegraph, is making population movement data temporarily available for free to help combat the spread of COVID-19, of course. And for this free sample of all of your people's data, we're just going to give it away at no cost. Just take the sample. The first hit's always free. We believe your organization could do additional good with access to the data. So they're basically saying, hey, agency, do you want to just have all this this warrantless information about people you're investigating? It's COVID-19. Things are crazy. No one's going to notice if you just get access to this data. Oh, you're a police agency? Oh, don't worry about it. You can use it anyway. It's crazy times, right? This pitch is just like sketchy. So what is actually contained in this offer? GPS pings for mobile phones. See roughly whatever percentage of U.S. phones every hour. See roughly percentage of worldwide phones every hour, and then raw data of anonymized phone IDs, lat longe, timestamp, and other data. So, wow. Like if they're able to brag that they have a percentage of the United States phones basically tracked, that's a pretty big selling point. So we also have visits, data that matches individual devices to retail and other points of interest to track visits over time. Notice this is compliant but highly sensitive data and must be treated with extreme care.
Oh, yes,
that we're giving
for
you
free.
for free. If one of your colleagues wants access to the population movement data for the use of, combating the spread of COVID-19 or just like crime or like whatever, just let us know.
I love how it's sneakily in
Yeah,
parentheses.
let me know and we can getting data access set up. Okay, so like not only is again this business like warrantlessly tracking like lots of people because they're not a law enforcement agency and they just try to collect as much data as possible to create these profiles, they're then turning around and giving the data away as a sample to get these agencies used to having access to it. Pretty sneaky. So like it kind of reminds me of the situation with like pharmaceutical companies getting in trouble, like going and like making it so doctors are way more likely to prescribe something they normally wouldn't by just like interfering and basically like offering like kickbacks and whatever else. At this point, it's like, oh, why would you go through the whole warrant process when you can just find out where your guy is right now? Just pay us $2,000 and we'll tell you where he is. Like that kind of access to private intelligence is something it's pretty scary for people who don't want law enforcement to do end runs around due process and other things that protect citizens who are, innocent. So that's why this sort of thing is a really big problem, and the amount of data that's being collected and the percentage of phones that it affects is pretty spooky, although that is redacted. But I'm very curious to know how much it is. Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm just going to touch on this very closely. I got this email too, Troy Hunt. Hello, I'm Hamad, White Hat Hacker. I've identified a vulnerability in your web application. Waiting for your capital P positive response. Best regards. My response would be no regards, Hamad, because you basically sent this to every security company in existence. Like I've had multiple colleagues from other companies tell me they also received this. So stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop.
Bad. All
right, moving on. So this is very funny. I probably like this take more than anything else. So NFTs are now taxable as digital assets. So it's basically considered to be cash, which is funny because that is what NFT people have been arguing for a very long time.
I mean, it is tied to cryptocurrency, and if they're going to deem it as money, then it makes sense.
So it's just very funny to multiple people that the IRS is now in complete agreement with the NFT community as to the value of their investments. Isn't capitalism great? So this feature of late-stage capitalism is now going to be taxed by the infrastructure bill. So digital assets are now covered securities. I'm sorry, I find this funny. So that picture of like a gorilla or that JPEG of a gorilla or whatever that you bought is now about to cost you thousands of dollars in taxes. Sorry about that. There's more to this, and this is actually a pretty good thread if you want to read through and see what this means for the crypto. And by that, this one specific time, I mean cryptocurrency and not cryptozoology. Every other time I say crypto, I mean cryptozoology. Back to that. But this members of that crypto community and NFT space are pretty obviously concerned about this because this was just for fun for a while. This was just fun. We're just goofing off, spending $12,000 on like a JPEG. It's fun. But it turns out the IRS has crashed the party and it's no longer fun. So get ready to pay taxes and, very predictable. Yeah. Very, very predictable.
Just kind of ironic.
Yes, it sure is. So I was on a plane when I read this, and it made me very upset. I hate that GoGo in-flight Wi-Fi added SMS verification. So if you don't know, when you're on a plane, they try to sell you Wi-Fi, and it's the same cat and mouse game that like hotels and peoples have been doing for forever. Usually, if in theory one was to just change your MAC address to the MAC address of someone who's already paid for internet, then you would both get internet, or at least one person would just get slower internet, and you would both still get a connection. And that worked for a very long time. But the system has been updated and now has some additional features like SMS verification, which is very funny because when you're in the sky, it's very hard to get an SMS verification. I saw that like some places remove this because they realize that in fact you cannot get the SMS verification, and just waiting until the end of the flight to get it is not very helpful. But it seems like for a while, all you needed to do was enter like any T-Mobile phone number, and this would just give you internet access immediately. And then if you just change your MAC address and add a one to the phone number and then just continue on, you would just continue to get free Wi-Fi all flight. I actually didn't know about this one. I was always doing the MAC address trick, so the fact there was another one out there that's recently been shut down makes me very sad. So it's interesting the way that companies try to do security when you're in an isolated environment like this. Like if you are like off in the sky somewhere, then probably, you don't have access to the kinds of security mechanisms you might on the ground. So the cat and mouse game between like paid like plain Wi-Fi and hackers trying to get free Wi-Fi in the sky, it has been going on for a long time. So I'm interested to see what the next development is. I'm comfortable sharing this because it seems like it's been fixed. It's just very funny that if you just picked a random T-Mobile phone number and just use that as your fake phone number while signing up for Wi-Fi, you just get a free hour. It's kind of cool. Okay, so there's been a lot of controversy in the UK about the way that police identify themselves due to a pretty nasty case in which a police officer was just doing a bunch of bad stuff. So they were proposing kind of this new trying to build confidence scheme where when a police officer stops and talks to you, especially if you're a single woman, they will call back to their operations center and have a supervisor confirm that they are not a pervert that's off doing their own thing. Which is kind of shocking that that's necessary to do, but it seems as though things are at the point where it is now necessary to be hello, I know I'm in a uniform and we're in a public, whatever, but here you go. I'm not gross.
Certified, not a pervert.
Yeah. So I think that this is actually something that's kind of good because it seems like there's been some serious damage of trust when it comes to policing over there at the moment. But it's an interesting way of addressing the problem with technology and trying to add some level of transparency to address something that a lot of people have been kind of shook by over in the UK. So, ew, that guy. Hello.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
Would you trust that man?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't, not if he showed up on the screen like that. It's sir, you're a cartoon. I'm not taking your word for anything.
Hello, I'm not a pervert.
Yeah. It's just I don't know about that. But we'll see how this goes. In general, I think that this is a nice step towards transparency, but I can also see some ways you could just have your friend in a room be yeah, this guy's good. He's nice. I've had dinner with him many times and he's never done anything bad to me. So, let him do whatever. It still seems as though there might be some flaws that if I thought that this was an application you could download as the woman and then press the button, scan the police officer's face, and then somebody comes up yeah, that's a real guy. He's on duty right now. He's fine. But this seems to be on the police officer side something that they'd be oh no, look me up, and then they give their phone. So maybe that helps. But either way, it does add an additional thing that someone would need to do in order to get away with being weird. So what are you gonna do? And now we're on to watering hole attacks. So this is for pro Hong Kong democracy websites. Interesting. Who might be interested in conducting watering hole attacks using zero-day exploits against pro Hong Kong democracy websites?
Not sure, actually.
Are you kidding?
Probably. I don't know.
Where do you know what's happening in Hong Kong?
As of now?
Yeah.
I actually don't.
What?
Fill me in.
I literally the amount of time it would take you to explain the geopolitical history of Hong Kong and what's currently happening would exceed what we have in our show. But let's just say that China is taking over and does not like democracy in Hong Kong.
Well, I knew that. I thought something some specific right or something was happening.
Okay, I'm shook. Anyway, China is the answer to that question. So obviously China. And this is, again, something that was discovered by Google. It's a zero-day vulnerability that was specifically targeting macOS. So again, like a little unusual to be targeting macOS, but a lot of more like affluent users use macOS. I mean, not saying anything, but a lot of more affluent users will prefer the macOS platform, which makes it a juicy target for anybody that's conducting these watering hole attacks. So Alex, do you know what a watering hole attack is?
I actually don't.
Damn. All right, well, that's the stream, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We'll guess. All right, so a watering hole attack is basically like literally, if you think of a watering hole as a place that all animals have to go in order to drink, a watering hole might be a website that a lot of people visit in order to do a certain thing. So if you are a pro-democracy person, a watering hole attack might be a really popular pro-democracy blog, or something like that, where a lot of different users would all be going. If you were trying to do a watering hole attack against like a company like, I don't know, a defense contractor, then maybe you would go and find, I don't know, a World of Warcraft website, because those nerds would be going to it constantly. I don't know. But, you know, like, so you would find something that the people you're looking to target all go to, and then you would attack that thing in hopes to get actually access to the people who you really want that are just going there as a matter of course. So that's really what this attack was doing, and that's what a watering hole attack is. It's not targeting the people directly, it's targeting the places that they go. So in this case, it was targeting them with a very specific 0 day. So one was for iOS and the other was for macOS. So this was very narrowly targeted at Apple users, which is interesting because, you know, like statistically, they don't represent as large of a portion of users, but it is worth the effort to go after them because they have a disproportionate amount of maybe more affluent users. So iOS exploits were, let's see, we have a exploit chain used in framework on Iron Squirrel to encrypt exploits delivered to the victim's browser. We did not manage to get a complete iOS chain this time, just one partial. Okay, cool. So they didn't get like everything that was being brought down in it, just a partial one where they got code execution in Safari. And the reason for this is the threat actors will try to make it so they keep their malware close in hand. Like they don't want to basically like put any cards down that they don't need to when they're attacking a device. They want to basically confirm that it's the device they want to attack and deploy malware very selectively in stages so they don't burn all their good exploits, as they kind of succeeded in doing here by limiting the number of exploits that Google was able to intercept while attacking this iOS device. We also had macOS exploits. So macOS exploits did not use the same framework as the iOS ones. The landing page contained a simple HTML page loading two scripts, one for capstone.js and another for the exploit chain. So the parameter is a global counter, which records the number of exploitation attempts. The number was in the 200s when we obtained the exploit chain. Interesting. So, like, you know, this is not a huge campaign. It's a highly targeted campaign. And honestly, these exploits are probably really expensive to develop. Although, unless they're just stolen. Like, a lot of the times, like, if you have a large enough, like, nation state like this, like, they'll just steal exploits from other researchers, and it's worth their time to do that because they can turn around and use them in campaigns like this. The exploit chain combined in remote command injection and WebKit, exploiting CVE 2021-1789, which was patched on January 5th before the discovery of the campaign and the zero-day privilege escalation. So, again, 0 days are a big deal. Nation states attacking individuals is a big deal, and this watering hole attack is just another example of how like a nation state is basically going after people who oppose their political ideology by performing technical attacks looking to infect users going to specific websites around these topics. So be careful, because like having a whole ass country come after you with these 0 day exploits that nobody knows about is a really, really big deal and very, very difficult to defend against. So yeah, very spooky. Yes. All right, going to breeze through these ransomware pieces. So Black Matter Ransomware is now claiming that they're going to shut down, and they're doing this because a bunch of them are missing. That's not good. Well, I mean, it's not good for them. It's probably good for literally everybody else. So they basically dropped a note that said, due to certain unsolvable circumstances associated with pressure from the authorities, part of the team is no longer available after the last news. Project is closed. After 48 hours, the entire infrastructure will be turned off, allowing issue mail for companies for further communication and Git decryptor. We wish you all success. We were glad to work. That's kind of a chipper note. It's like, some of our guys are missing. We're all going dark. We're going to go into the underworld and not come back. It's good to work with you. We had a nice experience. So what really throws me is these ransomware groups act like businesses because they have customers, they have people who use their products to make money and make them money. So their kind of business focused approach on this is really strange to me because they are organized crime. Like they're actually extremely organized crime. So in this case, the fact that they were like, sending out like a goodbye message and kind of like telling people what to do, how to follow up with their product, is interesting.
Yeah, it's funny to see a sweet little message left to you like that.
Yeah, so we see this also. There's a huge crackdown going on, trying to find members of this organization, trying to shut them down. So apparently some of that has succeeded, and it looks like now they're also needing to move some of their ransomware victims over to a different infrastructure. So since the Black Matter infrastructure is also shutting down, they're basically pushing the victims off onto another competing type of ransomware and be like, all right, our competitor over here will take care of you guys because we're out of here. So again, like these businesses kind of, these criminals act like businesses because they have customers and those customers are making a bunch of money and they get upset like if they're not able to cash in. So it looks like they are now continuing to offer ransoms and trying to collect trying to collect bitcoins and other ransoms from the infrastructure that's in a competing ransomware gang. So very, very funny. And again, I don't really know why these two would work together, but maybe they share some members or something like that. But really, a lot of the pressure that's happening is because the FBI is really going after these organizations, and so is Interpol. So there's a lot of pressure going on from international partners. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of money being spent on these investigations, and these ransomware gangs are up against a lot of heat right now because there's pressure to stop these actors from going after critical institutions because we really have very little defense against this. So yeah, law enforcement is really kind of amping up the attacks against them and trying to arrest as many people as possible. They also have been offering very, very large, rewards for information about members of these groups. So if you're a member of this group, you better hope that none of your friends are in financial trouble because now they have a free pass and like $10 million or something if they rat you out. So another development of this has been some tribal-owned businesses have also been hit. And this ranges all the way from, of course, casinos and other things that are just profit centers that are very, very, very much worth the ransom to get up and running because a lot of these make a ton of profit. And for what some of these ransoms are asking, like they could just get back up and running very quickly because it's not like it's healthcare data. It's not like it's something that's going to like cause people to die. On the other hand, there's also attacks against the networks of these tribal governments that then disable anything from happening, which can have very, very serious consequences. So just this starting to trickle down and affect tribal businesses and tribal organizations is something that's relatively new because a lot of them don't have the security posture to very effectively respond to this sort of thing. So another kind of unfortunate development of this, but taking down the police department's computer system, the 911 system, and the public health system is obviously a pretty big and a pretty aggressive step against some of these tribal governments that are really just like struggling to maintain their services and don't have time to deal with these sorts of attacks. And then I don't know much about the UK Labour Party, but I do know that they just had a ransomware attack. So they're also saying that there was a data breach here, which kind of sounds like the double exploitation attacks we see pretty frequently, where a threat actor, when they realize they have access to data, will first copy the data before ransomwaring it so that they have the only viable copy of the data and they can threaten to release it. So this is something that's very common because it means that there's two different mechanisms the threat actor has to kind of manipulate the victim. They can threaten to not give the data back, or they can threaten to dump the data on the internet. And that's something that often frightens victims even more than having to reset from backups or something. And this is a little bit more information from Europol. This is talking about some of the Revil and Snod, whatever, affiliates being captured. So you can see, Europol police, and then some other, I don't know what agency this is from, but either way, there we go. So Romanian authorities arrested some people who were involved in this ransomware group. And these are the kinds of attacks or arrests you're going to start seeing against this group actually start to have significant impacts on the group's ability to operate as the full weight of these law enforcement agencies are brought to bear against the people who are trying to make money off these attacks. Now, being a kind of like organized crime that focuses on customer service with their affiliates, that obviously has a lot of contact, which means law enforcement has a lot of opportunities to try to either infiltrate the organization or learn about what they're doing because of the amount and volume of contact necessary to communicate with victims, facilitate payments, and make sure that ransomware affiliates are doing a good job with their product. So it's not really a surprise to me to see that there have been more stepped-up attacks, but they seem to be mostly focused on contributing to decryptors. So once these groups are taken out, then you can also get access to the decryption tools, which allow you to then publish them for victims to not need to pay a ransom and also be able to get access back to their data. So expect to see more of these actions. Operation Gold Dust is one of them that was, again, 17 countries, Europol, Eurojust, and Interpol, all going after these actors and trying to take them down. And then we're kind of towards the end of our segment, but just a little note. If you, Alex, what is NPM?
It's like a package manager for JavaScript libraries. It's just like a piece of software that lets you install more software, but for JavaScript.
Yeah. So in this case, we've had issues with package managers for a long time because they can be updated in ways that maybe aren't totally secure, and that means if they're updated with malicious code, they can pull down that code into projects and infect them. And because there are so many dependencies for a lot of projects, that means if you hit a really, really popular tool or a really, really popular library or something, then it can be pulled down and embedded in lots and lots of different projects automatically if they update themselves. So it was found that there was embedded malware in RC and COA. So both of these were packages in NPM, and they were found to have malicious code, and I think it was the same malicious code was put into both. So anybody who accidentally installed these into their project might have infected whatever system they were working on. And this is really, really serious. Again, you can see it's a critical severity event on both. So if you work with JavaScript, just be really careful of frameworks like this that are designed to be convenient, but can accidentally be attacked and be used as a way of attacking other organizations. Again, this is sort of like a watering hole attack or a supply chain attack because they are not going after the individual developers. They're going after the framework that they use to keep all their code updated.
It's interesting to see these types of attacks where it's like something you inherently trust and don't think about as something that would be exploited. Because like it's just something you go ahead and just like run the npm install command, and you don't even know that you just downloaded malware onto your computer.
Yeah, or like really what's going on under the hood.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all right, that is all the time we have for today. We had lots of stuff we went over. If you have any topics you think that we missed, please feel free to drop them either on Twitter or in the YouTube comments. And if you have any questions, make sure to leave them because we will answer them on the live Q&A next week. So you can either leave them on my Twitter, which I had someone message me and tell me that they had a great question for me, if that was the right place to leave it. And then when it was like, yes, they're like, I forgot my question. So if you remember your question, sir or ma'am, please submit it however you like. But we'll make sure to answer it live. And of course, you can also hang out in the chat and we will answer your questions on the Tuesday chat.
Yep.
So that's all we have time for today. Alex, thank you very much for joining us. And if you want to see other great Varonis content, make sure to check out the Varonis brand channel, where you can see our sometimes host Killian doing the threat update, where he talks about the ways that real companies are reacting to threats out in the wild. All right, Alex, that's all. We will see you guys next time. Bye.